So Tina, I saw before the Olympic Games, well, obviously you went with David Liti, who is just such a legend. It's hard to explain. I think every time he gets on a platform, he does something that does the equivalent of weightlifting viral. His twerking that he did at the World Championships last month was spectacular, especially at 183 kilos in body weight. But I saw prior to the Olympics that there were some articles that had been written about the fact that he'd come and lived with you. And I wanted to get into a little bit about why that happened, because it seemed like it was a little bit more than maybe you'd both decided the best thing for us is that you come and live with us. And it was maybe somewhat circumstantial. And just talk about how that came to be and why the news reporters sort of picked up on it so much.
Well, I think maybe it's a little bit unusual to have an athlete that stays with their coach. So, and if David and I consider ourselves a team, but it's also unusual that I'm a female coach in such a male-dominated, not only sport, but in that super heavyweight premier kind of thing. So, but David's situation at the time was he's very much loved by his family and everything like that. But I just decided one day something had happened, and I just rang his sister and said, I'm taking David home. And he came home and he never went back. And I think because, big family was easier for me to feed him and provide the things he needed. We were going the same direction, always to training, etc. So it just worked.
And when was this when David was, obviously going to be an Olympian David, or was this before he got to that point and you sort of took a risk on him?
It was before that point, and it had nothing to do with his potential.
Right.
But everything to do with my philosophy around coaching the athletes, which is that you have to care, you have to show that you care, and you have to support. And that was the support that David needed at that time.
Yeah.
Would I have my house full of lifters? Maybe, if I could.
Yeah.
But that's the support that he needed at that time. And I think that was in 2017.
Yeah. Okay.
So
wow. So probably before I heard of him as an athlete, for sure.
Yes. Well, we'd done junior worlds, but and he'd started to be recognised a little bit there. But certainly 2018, I think, was when people first started to notice David.
I think what I love about that story is that if he hadn't gone on to be who he became, no one would have known the act of kindness that you did, that was just presumably is one of many things that you've done for your athletes that go far outside of the normal scope of here's your program, make sure you don't jump back because you're jumping back, stop pressing out, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. That most coaches kind of just fall into that. And I remember when I first got into the sport, at least in the podcasting sense, I did a lot with Glenn Pendlay, and he would always tell me stories about if he thought an athlete was good, they couldn't afford to come and train with him, he'd buy their ticket, he would put them up in his house, he'd feed them, he'd help them get a part-time job at the gym. And then when they were ready, he would kick them out. But he recognized that his job was, I need to make you the best weightlifter I can be, but also I need to make you the best person you can be. And if you can't afford to get to the gym, you're going to be potentially neither of those things. So my role as a coach is to do it. It seems like you have a very similar, very similar understanding.
Yeah, David and also one of his training partners, Anthony, to afford the bus fares was a challenge. Right. They would never ask me for the money, but I would hear them talking to each other around it. So I just found a way to start taking them home at night.
Yeah.
And in the opposite direction to where I lived at that point in time. But I expected them to come to training. I expected them to work hard, and I expected them to commit. So that was the little bit that I could do to help them get there.
Yeah, they had to give you something in return.
Yes.
Yeah, sort of hard work, respect, and it can't be totally one way, I suppose. But that's why I wonder. I mean, at the start of this interview or podcast, you said we see each other as a team, and it's like, how better to get an athlete to buy into the fact that you just want them to be, well, you care about them as a person, than by saying you can come and stay with me because it's going to be a better situation for you. And that now, because whenever I see you with David in the training hall, and occasionally there'll be another athlete there, but generally it's you two at all of these competitions I'm at, there is a difference between how you guys are and how all the other countries and teams seem to be. Like, there's a certain level of closeness between you. Like, maybe that's also because it's just the two of you, and then you're like training next to Team Georgia and there's like 15 people. You know, it could just be that. But also, like, David really doesn't. Whenever I come up to you guys, I'm like, David, what have you got today? Every time he's like, I don't know. I'll do what Tina says. Or he says, ask Tina. In his funny way that he does it. He's like, ask Tina. I just do what I'm told. But like, he just has trust. It's like 5 days before he competes at the World Championships. You would think that he would desperately need to know what he was going to do. But he's like, no, I will do what I'm told because Tina knows what I need to do. So why do I need to know it in advance? And it's like kind of amazing to see, you know, at that high level.
He will attempt anything I put on the bar.
Yeah.
I know that. And I guess for me, it's always been about the long game with David. I think he has such a raw strength, and he's still a young man and still growing into that, that it would have been very easy to get overexcited about that when he was a little bit younger. So he does sometimes say to me, when are you going to let me fly?
Really? Yeah.
I go, soon, David, soon.
Yeah, when I found out that he was younger than me, I was just like, how is that? I'm pretty sure he is. And I think it's by more than a couple of years as well. And I was just like, I feel like a boy around him because he's so big. Like, I don't know how tall he is, but he's not enormously tall. We're probably the same height. But when he said to me, oh, I weigh more than Asher at this competition, I was just like, how is that? How is that possible? But he's jacked in a way that a lot of supers aren't. Like, there's so much width to him and breadth, I suppose, in the upper body. And like you said, I think when you have someone like that and you know that it's the long game, you almost can't abuse the fact that they trust you and get them to take an attempt that they're going to miss, because then it's sort of like they lose it. Even if they do miss it, that's fine, because they will know, okay, you know what, I did almost have that. That was a good call. That was my fault for missing that. But if you suddenly said to David, okay, 250, you're ready for it, I know it, and he couldn't make the 250, there's a certain level of trust, I guess, that might be lost. But by basically saying, this is for the long game, so I'm going to give you attempts that I know you can make, he then buys in more and more. He's like, she got it right again. She got it right again. She got it right. So then when the day does come where you go, David, we need 243, and I genuinely believe you can make it this time. Whether he does or doesn't, he's like so bought into the fact that he makes attempts that you give him, that that's going to contribute to him just making that attempt.
Yeah. And as you well know, every competition is different. So the way it unfolds and then the attempts that you put on the board are around how it all unfolds as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And is that kind of methodology of not pushing too much, do you have that with all of your athletes? Or was it when you realized that David was going to continue past the standard 150 clean and jerk that your other athletes are maybe getting to, and you were like, he could be a 250 clean and jerker? Did you then implement the holding back style?
Well, it's around confidence, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how good they are, they still need to have confidence. And if your program results in miss, that's not confidence. And I guess building up to competitions, we do push. So don't get me wrong, we do push. and he's done a lot of personal bests on the platform, and
Yeah.
more and more in training now as he's got more mature. But I think it comes back to that confidence, which adds to that trust, which adds to the team in terms of what you're both trying to achieve,
right?
Which is all about David.
Yeah. Can we talk then a little bit about your gym? Because you gave a talk at Coaches Only that was such a runaway success. I've spoken to Josh about it offline. I've done a podcast with him online where I think it might have been one that goes up to our Patreon followers, but even so, it was to a lot of people. And I just broke down what you told me because I found it so interesting. And I think it came about because Josh had said that for the first time, he was feeling strong enough to say to his athletes, this isn't how we behave. Or maybe not quite like that, but like sort of put up some rules of like, this is how I think things need to be. And we'd been told a few years prior by Dave Spitz that he has like strong rules, and if you cross them, you're out. But he was telling it to us at a time where, I mean, I don't really coach anymore, but where if an athlete wanted to come and work with us, we'd just say yes, no matter what, because it's like, we need the athletes, we need the money, take everybody on. But then learning about your system now where you have strong boundaries and just rules that people follow. And it's so worth it because it seems that everybody trains harder. The atmosphere is better. It's just better for everybody, but maybe they're not the easiest things to implement. So can we talk about what some of those things are? I think it was almost like from the moment you come in, sort of shaking hands, and how does it work?
Very, very much. So I guess the shaking hands is morphed into hugs,
Right.
depending on who it is, and
nice.
Whether the boys are, just doing their bro shakes and things like that. But everybody is acknowledged. So we run a rolling kind of session. So start at 3:30 with the kids, the school kids come in, and then as people finish work, so it rolls right through until it's finished. But when someone arrives, they acknowledge everybody. And the young secondary school lifters have to shake my hand, and they have to shake it properly. None of those wet fish handshakes.
There's nothing worse than a limp handshaker, and they're out there among us. They walk around us. They don't know it's them, but there's nothing worse than
the art of the handshake's been forgotten, I think, unless you're in a business world, and even now with COVID, I think it's probably disappeared. But so it was that acknowledgement and that respect, and it took me a while, but I just persevered. And so I used to make a joke of it. If someone had come in, I'd go, "Oi, what have you forgotten?" And so I wouldn't go leave or get angry or anything like that. I'd turn it into a joke, or maybe I'd go to them sometimes if I sensed that maybe something wasn't right. But so the acknowledgement, and to this day, that still happens. Right. All right. It still happens. It's carried through, and everybody acknowledges everybody. And then I think one of the other things I implemented
can I on that one before we move on, can I jump in?
Yeah.
Two things. One is that I think as well there's like it's partly cultural, or maybe it used to be that everybody did this everywhere, but I've noticed that when I've been to other countries like Qatar, everybody shakes everybody's hand when they come in, and it is really nice. Because I naturally sometimes will think, especially if someone looks really big and cool or whatever, that maybe they're just not gonna want to talk to me or something like that. And then as soon as they come over, they shake your hand and they say, "Good to see you, hope you're doing well." Suddenly you're like, "Oh wow, this person's really nice, I like them." And they might have been thinking the same thing about me, which I'm sure happens as well. And then suddenly everyone in that gym feels great. And even if it was Miso or his dad, or like some kid who was coming in to lift weights in his first month of training, age 9, everybody did it, and it was such a nice environment. Then the other thing I wanted to ask about the handshake is, have you had small kids scared to shake David's hand? or is he so nice and friendly and jokey that actually they sort of feel at ease around him?
I think the newer ones, when they come in, they're a little bit reserved and unsure.
Yeah.
But David just, he's just so natural with it that
yeah. And he
it's
said to
like,
me, yeah, go on.
No, you say, you go first.
He said to me at Worlds last month in Tashkent, he was like, the thing is, I walk around here and everybody looks at me like, oh my word, you're massive. But he's like, at home, like loads of people are as big as me. And I don't know if they are maybe as quite as big as him, but I guess there are a lot of people there who are actually quite large. He sort of sticks out a little bit less.
Yeah, a different kind of large.
Yeah. But maybe similar in weight, but not quite similar as in muscle mass or something like that.
Yeah. I think that, I was saying to someone the other day, like a 200 plus clean and jerk in our gym, it doesn't even raise an eyebrow. It's just what happens.
Yeah.
Whereas in different gyms around the country, it's like, oh my gosh.
I don't know if there are any other 200 clean and jerkers in other gyms, are there? No. Like he's quite a way ahead.
Yes, he is. He is. So I guess with that comes an acceptance of, it's just David.
Yeah.
And he doesn't expect to be treated any differently than anybody else in that gym. He uses what weights are available, bar that's available. There's no pretense.
Yeah.
And he likes it like that.
That's great. I've been in gyms where people are lifting maybe 70% of David's numbers, which are still great numbers to do, but not on the same level, or maybe not even 70%, 60%, that sort of thing. Like they're a little bit better than me, sort of thing. And they sort of demand the best bar. And if you're using it or you're on the platform that they want to be on, or if you're just talking while they're lifting, which to be fair, I don't like people talking too much while someone's lifting. That does bug me, especially if it's a proper attempt. Or if you're just, they basically just act as though I'm better and therefore I deserve more of the things and the resources here, the focus. And I kind of love that about David, that I can totally picture him with a 14-year-old skinny kid who's trying to clean 60 kilos and he's sort of hyping them up, and then he goes and he cleans 210 quietly, and maybe people watch, maybe they don't, but I can totally see that in him doing something like that, and it is amazing.
Yes,
yeah, it really is. It's very cool. So after the handshakes, how else does it go? Like, are there rules to do with you have to be quiet when someone lifts a heavy attempt, or is it not like that?
That's expected.
Okay.
That the support for each other is kind of expected, especially in a competition cycle, building up something. And our Fridays are traditionally our heavier days. Then that support for everybody is definitely, it just happens, because I think that with the greeting, and it kind of brings everybody to that same place. I also have the T word. I don't know if you remember the T word rule standard.
It totally rings a bell that there was this rule, and it was a word that you couldn't say, and I can't remember what it. Go on.
Yeah, you're almost there. So the way the gym was set up, we had some grey partitions that just blocked off the free weights from the lifting area. And I got really frustrated, because come in, greet, handshake, how are you today? I'm tired.
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah.
And they'd all be tired.
Right.
And I decided that was like a pretty bad virus to have.
Yeah.
So I just started with no T word.
Yeah.
That was a rule, and it didn't take too long for them to pick up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just helped, because if they can come in, and they're not allowed to say that, because what I was trying to say to them is, however you're feeling, you leave that at the door.
Oh, okay.
You leave that at the door.
Mm-hmm.
You're here to train. You need to be ready to train. Doesn't mean it's safe to get on the bar straight away. You might need to chill a little bit if you've come from a stressful day, but you can't come in being tired and pulling everybody else down. Yeah. And so that's what that was trying to bring to the environment, was that you had to come in ready to work in a happy space. And just by, I think it brought out, oh, you said the T word, so it started this mocking, and even I have to be careful I don't say it.
Well, I noticed you didn't say at the start of this, where you really could have done, because for everybody listening, it's so bad of me, I apologize, but I was an hour late to this, and in New Zealand it's quite late, but there was no complaining or no I'm tired from you, so you're definitely upholding the gym rules on the podcast. It was great. But I know I can imagine also that it sort of, I find that saying I'm tired it's sort of like the lazy answer, because it's just the instant how you feel is like, yeah, I'm tired, and there's no sort of introspection and sort of like, I feel my legs feel fatigued, but actually my mind feels quite fresh today, and that's like a perfectly adequate answer, I feel. But you could just say I'm tired, and that sort of covers it. And it's like, but what does that mean when you say you're tired? Are you mentally exhausted because you worked hard, but your body feels ready to just release some energy? Because that's also tired. And it's just such a lazy, all-encompassing, but really saying nothing answer to just say, I'm tired. But it is more and more. I remember an adult saying this to me when I was about 13. They said, kids nowadays, they all say that they're tired. And he was like, people, you didn't used to say that so much. And I don't know what that is. Maybe they did and he didn't notice, but I definitely noticed that just being tired is like, obviously it's not new in the world, but it seems like the standard answer these days when you ask someone how they're doing.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a shame.
It is, and it was just an attempt to manage attitudes. We had some lifters that they'd sulk. And my observation was very much how destroying that was for the environment, and so, how do you deal with that when you've got a group of athletes and you've got one sulking because things haven't gone their way, so it was part of finding a way to work with attitudes, really.
Honestly, sulking as an adult is something that is such a weird thing to me. Like, I want to be able to say to them, like, are you a child? Like, you don't sulk as an adult. Like, this is very weird behavior that you have. And actually, I find that in that sort of situation, if you can get someone to sort of gently mock them, tease them a little bit, the person will come out of the sulk. Like, you make them realize, come on, you're being silly. Like, you're missing weights and now you're sulking, and just sort of tease them a little bit, poke them, and then eventually they'll crack and they'll let the pretense down, and they'll be like, all right, fine, I am being an idiot. But it's totally draining if you can't get them out of it, and it's like they are self-inflicting this on, they're inflicting it on everybody, and it's self-inflicted.
And if you've got very young lifters, you can't have that. You can't have that as an example within the facility. You have to find a way to knock it on the head, really.
And also, if someone older is sulking, it's probably nerve-wracking for the younger lifters. Like, they don't want to start yelling and having fun around them, because they probably are on edge a little bit about the fact that this strong person is now angry, basically, at their own misses or something like that. It's just a little bit awkward. Do you have any then leaving the gym type rules, or any rules like outside of the gym, where the one rule of this gym is you can't get into bare knuckle fist fights in the alleyway, that sort of thing? Like, any behavioral rules?
No.
Fights are allowed.
We kind of, I have just found that we interact together outside of the gym as well. So maybe after a bigger training, we'll all go and have dinner just at McDonald's or something like that.
Yeah.
Or team barbecues or different things like that. So we interact quite a lot together.
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, like David's never been a drinker. So, you know, we all know that there's critical times in these teenagers' lives when they, as they're growing up. And I haven't had to deal with that with a lot of the lifters that I've come through with, have come through with me, mainly because they've been quite focused on the sport and what they're trying to achieve. But I do know it's difficult, a difficult challenge to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the camaraderie of that group of athletes together helps to pull them through that. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be a rule. It just needs to be that group of athletes is there to support each other through that.
Yeah, it seems like you really focus on the idea that the most important thing to getting an athlete better is to get them to want to come to the gym 4, 3, 5 days a week for 10 years. And that before you worry about what style of periodization you're going to use or what corrective exercise you're going to use for their pull, it's like make it somewhere that they're going to come to. Because you could have the best program in the world, but if they don't turn up because it's just not fun, like they're not going to be good. And you could probably program slightly incorrectly, but if they were there every day because they loved it and it was where their friends are, it's where they got their confidence from, it's where they got to joke, it's where they felt like people acknowledge them, then they're going to be good because they're going to be there for 10 years and they're going to grow up there. And if, as long as they stay in the same city, they're going to bring their kids there and, you know, that sort of thing. And I think it's very easy for young coaches to sort of disregard that because they're like, oh, I want to show off my periodization style. And it's like, really, the athlete doesn't care. Just get them in the gym.
Yeah. And that's what it's about. It's about them having fun, them knowing that you care. So you expect them to be on time. So you need to be on time.
Yeah.
And you need to be there and you need to be present and you need to be up, but you need to be sincere with that. And that's probably one of the other rules that, or behavior standards, I should say, that we have is that no earphones.
Oh, okay.
So I go into a lot of gyms and they're all training with the earphones on, and yet they're training as a club.
Yeah.
It's like, but you can't hear each other. So no earphones.
Yeah.
You are here to support and lift, and that means no earphones. I mean, I hate it that phones have taken over our lives a little bit because you know programs will often be on phones and things like that. But as much as possible, I try to make sure that they're not used. I
think that's a great idea. The only time I've used headphones is if I'm in a bad environment and I've got a heavy attempt, and then I'll sort of take myself to the corner. But I have, like you said, I've always hated, particularly when I was trying to help athletes, if I was coaching, I would hate it if they're wearing headphones, particularly if they're in the middle of a set of 3 snatches and their first one was bad. And I want to say, you know, the bar's coming way, way off the floor and they just can't hear you. Then they wait till the end of the set. They're like, how was it? Like, well, it was terrible. And it could have been good. But you're not listening. And it's such an annoying thing. And I know like Josh, who is a great coach, who I've mentioned a few times. I don't know if you even know who Josh is, but I've mentioned he's a great coach and he knows a lot, but he will wear headphones when he trains. And I guess he's not being coached, so it sort of doesn't matter. He's just training for fun. But I always want to say to him, like, Josh, take those damn things out of your ear. Like, it's unapproachable as well for other people. Like, they want to like laugh at you in the middle of a set if the squat looks heavy, and like, you know, that sort of two-way dialogue isn't available when someone just can't hear what's going on in the gym. So I respect that rule. I like that a lot. Yeah.
And we always have a lot of music playing. You know, someone will be DJ and you know, so everyone gets their tune at the kind of music they like.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. I would like to, well, there are a couple of things. I want to go back way to the start of this conversation where you mentioned, I can't remember exactly what the context was. It was something, it was why you got picked on the news story, and you said it's a male-dominated sport, particularly in the supers. And I thought it was interesting that you said that, because actually you're right, that you might see women coaching, but you don't see that many women coaching super heavies on the men's side. And I don't know if that's like a backward feeling of larger men feeling like they need to listen to larger men, or if it's that it's intimidating for a woman to coach someone who weighs 170 kilos. But I'd never really considered that. And now watching, when I'm thinking about filming from the top for the super heavy backroom session, I think you might have been the only woman in the backroom. And I don't know if that's something that like at all you find worthy of even conversation. Maybe it's just, it is what it is. Or if you sort of acknowledge it and think about it a bit. But if you have any thoughts on that, it would be interesting to hear it.
I never really thought about it until a couple of other women said something to me, and they thought it was fantastic. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, I'm really glad that I can perhaps inspire other women to do that. But I remember my early days in the back room at some of these bigger events. I'd get pushed out of the way. You know, you think about that, like back in 2016, 2017, 2018, and there'd just been myself at these bigger events. So it took a long time, I think, to earn people's respect. It was a little bit, they weren't being mean or anything. It's just like, why are you here?
Yeah.
You know, whereas I notice a big difference now. I don't get pushed out of the way so much. They make room for me to make my attempt changes. And I don't know whether that's just because the world's moved on, but I just hope that I inspire somebody to do the same.
Yeah, I think probably maybe the world has moved on a bit, but not much in like 4 years. But I reckon you being in the back room every time Lash is in the back room, and every time the Iranians are in the back room, means that George S. and Idzi and whoever the Iranian coach is, they just come to know that you're always going to be there. And they probably also respect the level that David's at enough to then, you know, extend that to the coach, because they know what it's like being a coach of an athlete. And maybe that first time, you know, like you said, it was maybe a bit more hostile, or, you know, they'd bump you out the way to put their change in or something like that. And now they don't, which is great. And like you said, hopefully that does inspire, because we've had this conversation about weightlifting at Weightlifting House with regards to coaches only, because we want to have as diverse a group of coaches to teach other coaches. But because women got involved in coaching later, and then in smaller numbers, there are few that have reached the international level. And so then when you take like 50 coaches at the international level, only like 3 or 4, those numbers could be wrong, but are women. And so there just are fewer women at this point, but you almost need to make a point of highlighting them, just so that women who are like coaching at the national level can go, okay, cool, there are people there. I can get there. I don't need to be so worried. And I think it's probably more than anything that the biggest remedy is just going to be time, because you need the sort of the coaching experience of like a decade or more to reach that level where you can coach in the back room. And so if you've only been doing it for 3 years since CrossFit sort of blew it up, you're not going to get there yet. And it's still kind of like the old guard of the coaches who were coaching in the early 2000s and the 90s. They are basically the ones who are at the international meets. But it's almost as though the athletes have seen the change, where like half of the athletes in the gym that I go to tend to always be women. But then the more elite you go in the coaching world, it just drops off kind of massively, whereby like you're basically at the pinnacle and there aren't many other women around you.
No, and there seems to be this, that because you're a woman, you just coach women.
Yeah.
You don't coach men.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know where that comes from. Maybe culturally for some countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I've always been very mindful of making sure I respect the other cultures.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, often they would come and recognize David, but not me.
Right. That's so
And
frustrating. I can't
I'm
imagine
not
how
a
annoyed I'd be.
pushy person, but yeah. So I think the first time I thought, oh, I'm just going to make sure it happens. So
Mm-hmm.
I would just go and make sure I would acknowledge them.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's a lot of acknowledgement. Like even Messo's dad will give me a hug now.
Right.
And you know, that's pretty big.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's taken since 2016.
I bet. Yeah. Yeah, he is by far the most reserved of the Hassonas. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, it's a journey, and I hope that I'm a bit of a trailblazer and a pioneer for the women to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like you said, culturally, and then also it's probably, you know, the whole expectation that you would coach women probably comes from the fact that the men who think that would struggle to be coached by women, and they extend that kind of problem that they would have out to all other athletes, not recognizing that like there's no difference really, or if there is a difference, it's not a negative one, it's just a difference, but the outcome is the same. And so they just extend their own, like, oh, I've never worked with women, or I've never had a woman in a position of power over me because of where I'm from, or you know, that sort of thing. And they just extend that to weightlifting. And I guess the more you do go up to them and you go, you're shaking my hand, like the more they're going to be like, okay, yeah, this is normal, this is a good thing now. But I would like to ask, actually, and I know we don't have a ton of time because I've kept you waiting, but can we talk about the fact that you have made it to that top level, which means that you have been around a long time? And I don't actually know at all your origin story into the sport. And I know that in New Zealand, it's not like, oh, New Zealand and weightlifting, you know, they're two of the same. You know, it's New Zealand and rugby. Yeah, that's what we know New Zealand for, at least in a sporting sense. At least me, because I was a rugby player growing up. So how did you get into weightlifting?
Okay, short version. All right,
Okay.
I'll give you the short version. So I ran a education company for many, many years, and it was targeting the very first personal training course, aerobic instructors, aqua instructors, all of that kind of thing. So, you know, education. And I was bringing over a colleague from, I think it was Australia, and they said they would only come and lecture on my particular course if they could train in a proper Olympic weightlifting gym.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that was. So I wanted to do the right thing by them. And so I did my research, found the only gym here in Auckland at that point in time, which was Gillies Ave, and went in and saw the old boy, who I didn't know at the time was deaf. And so when I walked in the gym, he thought I wanted to learn to lift.
Oh my God. Okay.
I didn't get an opportunity to say until afterwards, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I started lifting very late in life, even though all of my background was in, you know, sports studies, sports science, all of that. I didn't actually start lifting till later in life, and I did some time as a master athlete. Lifted around the place, and I had the most wonderful coach called Bruce Cameron, who himself was a Commonwealth Games medalist and selected for the New Zealand Olympic Committee. So I owe a lot of where I am today to him. And then I started coaching as a favor to one of the older members in the gym who was passing away. And that just led me on my journey. We moved the gym to where it was in central Auckland, which was attached, or not attached, but a 5-minute walk from One Tree Hill College, which is where David was. And where the other 2 young men who I both coached to Commonwealth Games level. They were brothers, so that was their dream, to go as brothers to lift at the Commonwealth Games. So we did that in 2014.
Wow.
And that's just been my journey ever since. The Guanaris boys. So Ian Guanaris was 62 kg lifter, and Lou Guanaris. Lou went 2010 and 2014, and Ian just in 2014. Yeah.
That's an amazing story. That is such an interesting roundabout way of getting involved in weightlifting. Is this like early 2000s?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah.
Wow. What a time to get involved in weightlifting. I just can't, I can't imagine. Yeah. That's cool. And there probably were, like you said, just one gym where you were from that would have weightlifting facilities almost.
Yeah, it was. It's where Nigel Avery trained.
Okay.
It's where Richie Patterson started. And then I think the other key component in my background really is that I'm a master Pilates trainer. So I'm a teacher trainer. And because if you know anything about Pilates, especially the classical style, it works a lot with movement and movement patterning. So I have found that very useful in a lot of my work that I do with lifters. Yeah.
So is that in terms of it's the same style of teaching to sort of show someone how to move in Pilates as it is to sequence movements in weightlifting, or is it literally the positions are? I don't know enough about Pilates to know.
Yeah, no, the positions aren't. So shall we say, when you teach movement, there's some good ways to do it and some long-winded ways to do it. So I think my teaching, my eye was developed by all these movements with Pilates, and then with my very strong fitness background. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it's always great when a skill that you never thought would be useful sort of transfers nicely to another thing that helps you then sort of exceed in that one thing. So at what point did you get a gym? Or at least what point did you start sort of coaching in the gym that you're in?
We 2009 we moved to the gym. The education company had been up and going since 1993. I've been running that, but we always worked out of other people's gyms. And so to have our own gym was always a long-term goal, because you'd be teaching students and you'd have the music up, and you didn't quite have control of the environment that you wanted. So 2009.
Right. Do you know, I think the before you and David, the sort of the link that I had from New Zealand to weightlifting was through rugby, where I used to watch everything I could about the All Blacks because I was obsessed with rugby myself. And the 2 props, I think they were the Franks brothers. Owen Frank, maybe, but the Franks brothers. There was a video that went out of them doing weightlifting as part of their training, and they put on their weightlifting shoes. And this is right at the start. This is like 2010 or 11 for me. And so I was just like, wow, I've not really seen these shoes that much before, but they seemed to help. And they were squatting a lot. And I don't think their lifting was actually that great, but they were probably power cleaning like 140 or something for a few reps. And I remember watching them and be like, wow, these guys are such amazing athletes that they can run around for 80 minutes and still do that. And I watched that video so many times. But I think that was my first touch point with New Zealand weightlifting. which again, maybe not the strongest touch point because they weren't actual weightlifters, but it got me in at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we probably need to wrap up. Final sort of quick thing then is, in fact, I'm not going to ask. I was going to ask, what are the lifetime predictions for David? I'm not even going to do that because you probably don't know. And if you do, you probably don't want to put them out there.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you.
No. I mean, I've got numbers that I think he can do. But even that, I don't know if I'm going to put out there because I don't want him to hear it and then be like, that's lowballing it, or, oh my God, I'm never going to do that. But I think there's some pretty big milestones that I think he's more than capable of hitting at some point in his career, especially because he is like 24, 25 or something.
Yeah, 25.
Yeah, that's just unbelievable.
Well, my prediction that I will share with you is that this year is going to be a great year.
Okay.
We've got 2022 Com Games.
Oh, which is about 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now, by the way. So I will definitely be there for all the time. And if you need someone to train, you can come and train at Weightlifting House because we've got platforms and everything.
Oh, I'll be in touch.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And then not long after that is the World. So, and I guess very soon we'll all find out what the qualification process is going to be. So
yeah. Do you know where Worlds is going to be? Oh, no, sorry, it's in China, isn't it? Do you know when it's going to be?
Yes.
Because is it like October, November, or December? It's crazy that they don't make that public.
They've got October, but they don't have a particular date.
Okay.
They've just got the month.
Right. Okay.
Date to be confirmed.
Helpful. Yeah. Okay. October, China. Yeah, I can't wait for that. That'll be a fun one. And it's going to be a tough one because that China's not going to have a Worlds that they're going to host and not be in tip-top shape. So it's going to be,
and
yeah, go on.
Then I guess the qualification process will also support all these jumping around of body weights and
I suppose the qualification for the Olympics, the first competition that will count for will be Worlds, won't it?
It'll have to be, yeah.
That'll be like the start of the first period, I guess. And then it's nice that for David, he doesn't have to worry about the change in weight classes too much. I'm guessing he's not going to cut to 102. So, and I don't think there are that many 109s who will go up. Because a lot of those 109s were 105s. So I think they're just going to take the hit and try and get down to 102 and compete with the 96s who are moving up, which will be a lot of fun. But I don't think there are many 109s. As much as I'd love to see some of the top 109s pack on 20 kilos and start snatching, in the 200 range, I don't think they're going to take that risk because they know that they can't really medal against the real super heavyweights. But it's an interest. I mean, obviously we both hate what's going on in the world of weightlifting at the highest level politically at the moment, but anything that changes things is always a little bit exciting just because there's new sort of matchups, which is going to be fun. Tina, thank you so much for staying up so late to talk with me and with everybody else who's listening. Where can I send people to learn more from you, whether that's Instagram or websites or whatever you prefer as a method of people getting in touch?
So we're just about to launch our revised website. So that's strengthhq.co.nz.
NZ at the end. Okay, cool. I'll put that in the bio.
.co.nz. Yeah. And then Instagram, strengthhq.weightlifting.
Awesome. Yeah. And also through that account, you actually see the lifts that David doesn't post. So it genuinely is worth a follow. So I'll put links to both those down below. Tina, once again, thanks for coming on. Really enjoyed just listening to you talk about coaching in a far more refreshing, healthy, probably useful way than the conversations that we normally have about should it be a triple or should it be a double, kind of clearing the chaff and realizing that there's actually a little bit more substance behind the whole thing that we need to focus on. So I appreciate that. Guys, we'll be back next week, I imagine, with another episode of the Weightlifting House podcast. So make sure you stick around.